Hey, this is Josh from Vitality Maximize, and I have this observation that I'd like to share. Before we begin, if you've been enjoying and viewing our content for some time, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on those bell notifications on YouTube and on Odyssey. A common thread that I see in multiple diet circles, from paleo to primal to ancestral and even more so carnivore like diets, is that they're all too focused on the past. Before I plunge in, there is absolutely nothing wrong in having hindsight. And by hindsight, I mean looking at what people have done in the past, whether when there was little chronic disease, looking for what humans ate and what they did and how they live before these places, before these cultures became more modernized, or before the Industrial Revolution, or even before the agricultural era, where we were, hunter gatherers. I do find it a sign of intelligence. However, I think there are some problems with this approach which I cannot ignore. Problem number one is that we do not live in a completely natural world. Even if you do not eat any processed foods that ever existed until about 150 years ago, we are living in a time where in many industrialized areas there are multiple cell towers and other sources of non-native EMFs that is inducing oxidative stress and slowly destroying our ability to utilize oxygen, among many other attacks. We live in an era where we're destroying habitats and ecosystems to drill coal, oil, and gas, which drive the petrochemical and the pharmaceutical industry. In turn, we poison seafood, poison rivers, and oceans. We live in an era where countries, including the one that I'm living in right now, are in a nuclear arms race. Who remembers Fukushima and Nagasaki? Do you see how the fallout is affecting oceans and people on the border of the Pacific Ocean, adding more radioactive chemicals like cesium? We live in an era, although truly organic farming is making a slow comeback, we've had decades upon decades of the use of superphosphate fertilizers, which erodes the topsoil, the absurd use of herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides on our food that has virtually contaminated all of our soils. Remind me, isn't Bayer getting sued left, right, and center for their Roundup pesticide, glyphosate, and its strong connection to cancer and many degenerative diseases? We live in an era where governments and military around the world are spraying various chemicals to supposedly control solar radiation. Top contaminants are aluminum, barium, strontium, polymer fibers, graphene, surfactants. We live in an era where one is exposed to at least a few thousand toxic chemicals a day, even though you may live as close to a pristine life as possible. I could go on and on and on, but these things add so much complexity on how one can truly heal and revitalize, and just copying to a T what the Maasai or the Inuit or anyone that a hunter-gatherer area of mostly meat, or even reading about indigenous cultures in nutritional and physical degeneration, big up Weston A. Price, that ate high animal protein diets are not precise enough to break down barriers and open doors to your health and vitality. Here is a video I encountered of someone who tried to learn from the healthiest people around the world and still struggle to make progress.
So mainly, when I was very young, I began to have problems with health in general. And in particular, I showed very much signs of what we can call syndrome of the autistic spectrum. In particular, the high functioning one. Can you hear me right? Just stop me if you can't hear me.
We will.
Thank you. Great. So I was, I had not just mental signs, but even physical signs. So I had undeveloped muscles, problems of physical coordination, like my rear foot, for example, tended to get stuck while I was walking and not, moving. In the 80s and 90s, autistic was some experts even used to fight to make people understand that it was an actual thing, and not something that people was inventing. So that was the beginning of my problems with health. I had then other problems. I will not go into details, but at a certain point, the problems were so much that I said to myself, well, what are we going to do here? I am so young and I am not functioning at all. So what are we going to do? And that was the beginning, of my journey into alternative health. For personal reasons, I decided to take the route of alternative medicine from scratch, from the beginning. And then I began, to roam around like every young man does. First, I began by watching videos on YouTube, and I began to practice diets. I was passionate, but then I noticed that diets alone were not doing that much, and so I went on and on searching. Another step point, I would say, was discovering the naturopathy, in particular the tribal medicine stuff. That kind of began to put me in the right direction, but still, and I was really wondering what's happening. Why? I was studying the medicine of the tribesmen because my personal philosophy is that you should learn from people that are healthy. You should learn from people that show the signs of health. And from my studies, I was astounded. Wow, this guy's got a great percentages of centenaries or ultra centenaries, and so I thought, okay, let's learn this. But still, I wasn't succeeding. So I began to ask myself, what's happening there? And
problem number 2, some of the carnivore leaning folks claim that plant foods never existed up until a couple thousand years ago, and they're all frankenfoods, so we should avoid them. Examples are the Brassicaceae family, cauliflower, broccoli, etc. A few months ago, I had an animated discussion with someone who I presume is on an animal foods only diet. He said this, and I quote, "The further we get from what humans ate for millions of years, the more problems we are likely to face." End quote. Another quote, "Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts are apparently all man-made foods. Most fruit in the grocery store has been engineered to be freakishly large and sugary, barely resembling the forms found in nature. Roots like carrots in the wild would be tiny and fibrous, now are massive and sweet. Many modern grains are heavily hybridized and tweaked." These are valid points to make, and I'll give him that. Most of the plant foods have been hybridized and tweaked, and the further we deviate from what we've been eating for eons, the more problems we face. However, I have to ask him this: why doesn't he keep the same energy for animal foods as you do for plant foods? If we even take away grain feeding, GMOs, and feedlot-like operations out of the equation, haven't we selectively bred animals for greater milk production, more tender meat? Even grass-fed beef that you and I enjoy today, do they come from heirloom cows? Most of them do not. I asked him whether these selectively bred plant foods, right, like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, how does this change or influence the ability for one to digest these foods? Do you know his answer? His answer was not sure. If someone can explain to me why you should avoid certain plant foods because they've never existed for thousands of years, and how it affects our ability to digest them, drop a comment below, because to me, selectively bred is not a reason to avoid the food. I round off by saying that learning from past eras, cultures, and Paleolithic times are a good starting place to ask yourself what you ought to eat and how to be in decent health. But do not end your exploration on that alone. If you want to expand your understanding about the science of human energy and how that relates to your diet, you can start with my previous content in November, Almost All Diets Fail in the Long Run. Thanks for your time, and signing off.